edition of Gas. I am Gresh. He is Jason Anik.
We're playing everybody and we're winning the game last night.
The head coach is fighting people on the sideline.
What do you got for me?
I know you're a part of Tight Pants Society.
No fucking play is that a gimme, right?
Let's go! It is time to go, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome into the 10th edition of Gas right here on the YouTube channel, of course, at The Real Gresh on YouTube. We are streaming live on X. I do believe we are on the gram as well. And oh my, LA did not completely tear up Jason Anik as he has made it back from his trek to the left coast. How are you, brother?
To the best coast. I'm good today, right? And I'm a little bit under the weather. And as I was getting ready for the show, I'm sitting there thinking to myself, I get Andy Gresh right now. What a perfect elixir. My boy Gresh for an hour. I have a feeling I'm going to be feeling a lot better at noon than I do right now at 11. But I'm all fired up. LA was great. I know we'll get into the card a little bit, UFC 311. But as always, we're moving forward. Not as much so back.
No, I know. I'm still lamenting the fact that Umar Nurmagomedov broke his hand after it looked like he was in control against Merab Dvalishvili. And I know that you and I will unpack some UFC 311 because, brother, I woke up today and I said to myself, there are 3 games left in the football season. Of course, we had the College Football National Championship game last night, which I know that we'll touch on, but we now have a championship round set up in the NFL. And, it really is a tale of two sides, so to speak. There's the NFC and then there's the AFC. And in the AFC, Kansas City held serve. You and I expected that. But that Baltimore-Buffalo game was everything you could have wanted in the last game of this past weekend and more.
Unless you're a Ravens fan or had money on that side, right? Unbelievable. 4 turnovers for Baltimore, none for Buffalo. I think Baltimore outgained them by 143 yards. Curious how Mark Andrews is doing this morning. Maybe doing a little better on Tuesday morning versus Monday morning, hopefully. But, Lamar Jackson had 3 turnovers of his own, and to lose by only 2 points and really, to me, look to be the better team, got to be really disappointing. And for me, Gresh, we talked about this last week. That game, Ravens, Bills, it was all about those 2 quarterbacks. Who's going to be the MVP? Well, whether the individual accolades, whatever they may be, one of them you knew was going to be super disappointed this week. It'll be interesting to see if the other one is disappointed 1 week from now.
Yeah, and I expect that for the Buffalo Bills. But, it's funny in terms of the Ravens, right? Because even you and I have talked about Lamar Jackson, and look, it's either him or Allen for the MVP, as we know. If I had a vote, I would have gone for Lamar. And not that I've completely flipped on the guy. However, he is quickly turning into a great regular season quarterback who finds a way to not get it done in the postseason. And everybody is lauding Lamar Jackson for driving them down the field and putting them in position to be able to tie the game. Well, he had to because he was a part of the problem of getting them the big deficit. So, we look at Lamar and say, hey, great job, man. You brought him back. But I can also look at it and say it was a lot more of Lamar Jackson in the playoffs where he isn't the guy we see in the regular season and ultimately turns the ball over.
And I think that's a great point. You brought up that point earlier on multiple episodes of this show, I think trying to give me some pause as I think you made a comment to me at one point, like, where do we see him in the postseason, Jay? I really think that for you were sort of expecting it. Now, let me ask you, did you pick this game? Did you bet on this game?
I did. And it's funny. I gave out 2 7-point teasers that actually worked both ways based on that game. So, so I did. If I were to have picked the game, I probably would have listened to you and gone Baltimore, in part because I'm not a big fan of Buffalo. But with the way I teased it, it worked both ways. But yeah, I probably would have leaned Baltimore.
Yeah, so Gresh had Kansas City, Philadelphia, both close to pick'ems in the teasers, and then Buffalo plus 8.5, Baltimore plus 5.5. Well played, sir.
Yeah, it's weird when it works both ways. But look, for Buffalo now, they have to go to Kansas City and slay the dragon, right? Now this is where Josh Allen finds himself of okay, I got to beat this bleeping guy just to get to the Super Bowl.
Right.
That's the other part of this, right? Like you and I in, 2018, 2019, or 2018 it would have been, loved the whole Tom Brady going to Kansas City and beating Pat Mahomes. Mahomes couldn't beat him. Now we're in the exact same scenario again, except playing the role of Tom Brady this week will be Pat Mahomes relative to Josh Allen trying to go in there and be Superman.
Well, we're both based in New England, or our roots are based in New England. And in 2004, when the Red Sox beat the Yankees after being down 3-0 in the American League Championship Series and lose that game 19-8, and then they come back and win 4 straight against the Yankees, felt like when they got to the World Series, it was inevitable. And I do feel as though if Josh Allen could find a way to get through Patrick Mahomes here, good luck to the NFC opponent, because I think if he gets through that, I can't imagine them being any more confident as a squad to be able to go win their first championship.
Yeah, it will be interesting on that end. And you mentioned the NFC side, and oh, baby, you were on Washington as being live to go to Detroit and get this done. And I admit, I was not feeling it. I wasn't into it. And oh, my goodness, talk about winning a game on offense, which is what I thought Detroit was going to have to do. Well, Washington just goes out and wins it on offense. And Jay, it's the whole two-sided coin here. There is the, wow, that's a massive blow for Detroit that we need to unpack. But oh my God, in one short year, the Washington Commanders have found themselves in an NFC championship game. And it's more than just getting Jaden Daniels, but boy, he's a big part of that.
Oh, he's a huge part of it. And let's start there, but we got to touch on the Lions because, oh my goodness, I can't even imagine how you navigate the day-to-day. Ben Johnson's in Chicago too. But Jaden Daniels, and I'll say this, right, because I don't mind being wrong. When I was in Vegas at the beginning of the season, I placed a Super Bowl wager, a little bit of a flyer, and it was on the Bears. Should have been on the Commanders, right, at 150-1 or whatever it was. I think the Bears were 40-1. And I believed in Jaden Daniels more than Caleb Williams, but I believed in that Bears roster more. And Jaden Daniels, we talked about this yesterday on the huddle on oddchart.com. Were you aware of any of this virtual reality training that this guy has done?
I was, because I know the guy who created it.
Wow.
Oh, well, it's something, brother. It really is. Like,
well, so you
more
may know
than
more.
The VR golf.
Yeah, right. So for those of you that don't know, Jaden Daniels has done this since his days at LSU, where it's this virtual reality training. Everything's at 1.75 speed. So by the time and you're seeing defenses and everything is fast. So by the time you get to the real game, everything's slowed down. That's how it looks. I talked a week ago or 2 weeks ago, there was a third down incompletion for Washington. And the smile on Jaden Daniels' face after throwing that incompletion was just so poised. It was like he knew they were going to go for it on fourth down and they knew they were going to get it. His teammates are talking about him being clutch. I can't say enough about them going in there and believing it. And when Terry McLaurin took that screen pass and broke through that line and took it to the house and was asking for volume from the crowd, they were live. I think they have a great chance this weekend. Division opponent. Unbelievable day for Washington. And for those fans, couldn't be happier for them.
Yeah, they went through a lot, did those Washington fans. There's no doubt. Now, I do think we need to remember Jaden Daniels a little older, came in a little more mature, and Washington knew they were going to have their pick of either Jaden Daniels or Drake May. They went with Jaden Daniels. I'm not going to use that as an indictment on May, but it is important to know Daniels at least a year or two. I think it's like 2.5 years older than Drake May, but also the fourth down going for it, Jay. And some of these stats. Now, check this out. The NFL converted 435 fourth downs and 56.8% of their fourth down tries this season. That's the highest since they've ever been counting this, since 1980. So the aggressive approach, what's interesting to me, Jay, is that Detroit was the one who was being lauded for being aggressive and going for it all the time. And in reality, it was Washington using that strategy against them to go get this win.
It's just unbelievable. And obviously we've seen a shift in the NFL and it makes great sense in most of I'm not surprised by that data, if I'm being honest with you. But the Detroit Lions, it's so much more than just a juggernaut on offense to win a football game in the postseason. And they've been so banged up. And man, you give up a 45 burger. Aaron Glenn going to go coach the Jets. I just can't imagine what it's like to be the Detroit Lions. 5 turnovers. And, you talk about Jaden Daniels being clutch. Maybe Jared Goff isn't. Sean McVay was happy to trade him, get Matthew Stafford back and hoist the championship. I thought this trade was good for both teams, but I don't know where Detroit goes from here. I can't imagine that they are going to be primed and ready to make the same type of run they did the last 2 years. Do you?
I think they'll be closer to right than wrong. I feel like there's a lot of good stuff there. To me, the biggest issue for Detroit is not what is going to happen on the field. It's what's going to happen off the field. Because as you and I are sitting here this morning, Ben Johnson looks like he's going to the Bears. And right now, Aaron Glenn is hot, hot, hot to maybe be the future head coach of the New York Jets. Now, even the great Bill Belichick and you and I following those Patriot teams, there was only one time where they lost both coordinators, and that was in 2004 after they beat Philadelphia in Jacksonville, and then came all the replacements. So to replace one is tough. To replace two, it's not impossible, but boy, it's going to be a lot of work for Dan Campbell to sort of maintain that standard with new coaches walking in.
No question about it. And the Patriots, right? They had the luxury, as you pointed out, to have that happen when you're losing Weiss and Crennel after winning your third championship in 4 years. Detroit didn't win anything with these guys going, didn't even get to the big game. So I think it's going to be interesting to see. And, Belichick was always the defensive coordinator of the Patriots, rarely even named a guy. So even when Crennel was running it, Belichick had his fingertips all over it. But it'll be really interesting to see what happens with that offensive coordinator position in Detroit, because I think we've talked about Mike Vrabel and what he did for the confidence in Tennessee of Tannehill, And so I really think the confidence, more than even the play calling for Jared Goff, getting a guy that can make sure Jared Goff continues to believe in himself after a huge, huge setback in that game on Sunday.
Yeah, and I know that there is a lot of talk of offensive coordinators moving around. I mean, Jay, it was only 10 years ago where the rate that you're paying high-end offensive coordinators is what you were paying your head coach, minus the guys who had their hands stamped, like Belichick and Reed and people like that. So now the offensive coordinator market, you can still go out there and get rich. Our guy, right. our guy Cody put in the chat, what about the possibility of someone like Chip Kelly to New England? I don't know. And the reason I say that is that do you want to go to the pros, put in the work of really dealing with nurturing a quarterback at the pro level? Or if you're Chip Kelly, you're living in Columbus, it's cold, but it's not that bad. You just won a national championship. It does make me wonder where something like that would, say, line up for a Chip Kelly and dudes who also get into a good spot, because let me tell you something. Ohio State's roster might be better than New England's next year, and that's saying it with all due respect. So some of these guys are going to want to jump around, but I don't think all of them are leaving for head coaching jobs. And, we'll see what happens with Chip Kelly. Chip will always be in vogue. I mean, he's 61. Right. He's 61 years old. I saw him when he was with the Eagles, and he made a fat joke at me, which is fine. I've known Chip since I played or whatever, and that's totally cool. But he's also a different cat, and I think he's made about 80 million and has an ex-wife but no kids or whatever. Money is not the issue for Chip Kelly in trying to lure him somewhere, whereas with some of these other OCs, like Ben Johnson's going to get himself a pretty nice raise based on what NFL head coaches are paid these days.
No question. I think Johnson was making $4 or $5 million to coordinate that offense. Mm-hmm. So I want to swing this to the Patriots and just ask you a question. So, Chip Kelly, Josh McDaniels, let's say those were a couple candidates. I mean, which way would you lean? Or is there another guy I'm not naming?
No, I would, if you're giving me those two, I'm going Josh, because I know what he can do with quarterbacks. I know he's been around quarterbacks at an elite level. And with Chip, there's kind of the bouncing around a little bit. Chip's probably a more inventive and better play caller than McDaniels, but aren't you really hiring this guy to try to nurture Drake May into what people think he can be? And I feel like with Josh, he would kind of know how to do that at the pro level, although there are some dudes that Vrabel knows that might be kind of out of the box candidates. And you and I might be sitting here a week from now having done research on, some guy. I mean, hell, they could do, here's Cody Merrow. And it's like, there he is. And then we're going to the Google machine, finding out what this guy does and calling plays.
Well, and that's the blessing as a Patriots fan that Mike Vrabel's in that spot right now, because I'm not really worried about it. And even though you and I may really think Josh McDaniels makes all the sense in the world, you can be sure if Vrabel goes with another candidate, and I say that Vrabel goes with another candidate because you can be sure it's going to be his decision, I'm really going to be fine with whatever it is because I trust the shit out of him.
I'm with you. I feel so much better that there's an adult in the room now. And all this stuff that came out about Gerard Mayo, again, when your coaching philosophy is just, I'm going to be different than Bill, you proved you were in every way, and that's why you're out of a job. But nevertheless, last night, the college football playoff, it's the first win in the expanded college football playoff where Ohio State did the job beating Notre Dame 34-23. Now, Jay, look, you had a long weekend. You were coming back from LA. You're not feeling good. I understand if you were not up very late last night to see what turned into a sweat for fans, right? So Ohio State's up like 23-24, whatever in the world it is, right? You're thinking they're kind of cruising. This 31-15. I started paying attention a little bit. Next thing I know, like I went to the garage, if you know what I mean. And then I came back in and I see that it's 31-23. And the first thing I said to one of my kids, I go, dude, the line's 8.5.
8.5.
Like, oh, and they were sweating it literally until about, 45 seconds left on the clock when Ohio State kicked the field goal. 34-23 is the final. So if you were a bettor and you were on the good guy side, the Ohio State side, not that I'm an Ohio State fan, it's just more from the betting end, you were sweating it out there late, but Ohio State, what a run for them as an 8 seed to win it all.
Absolutely. And, as soon as they lost that game to Michigan, I bet on them to win the title right at that point, and I believe they would. And that loss to Michigan in the conference champion, or at the end of the season, that would have prevented them from competing for a title in every year other than this year. And what they beat Tennessee, Oregon, Texas, Notre Dame, get an opportunity to play Tennessee at home in front of their fans. Unbelievable what a difference 5 or 6 weeks make for Columbus, Ohio, and Ryan Day. Ryan Day probably not going anywhere, probably less rumblings about that. It's just fascinating. I'm really happy for the program. Got a lot of family in Columbus, Ohio, so big day for the Buckeyes. And I am happy for the Notre Dame fans that while it was sort of a blowout, that they made it interesting for their fans. I guess that locker room in Notre Dame, I guess there was some devastation in that Andy Locker game post-game.
Yeah, because I'm sure there are some dudes on Notre Dame who are like, man, we might not get back here. The path is goofy now, right? And we have one more year of the existing playoff as it's constructed, Jay, and then it can be opened up once again. And the feeling is that they might even try to rush to go to 14 next year and then to go to 16 after that. And then you kind of got to cap it, I think, at that point in terms of 16. But, we went from never having a playoff to now maybe having a true playoff. And it is interesting that the 8 seed won. And, Jay, you make an interesting point of in the old system, Ohio State wouldn't have even qualified because they didn't win their league or weren't playing for a conference championship. And I do like this way better. Now, they'll fix the seeding, at least I trust, but there is something about the 8 seed winning the tournament that definitely sends a message, I think, to all college football fans that even though Ohio State is a big name and a big brand, anybody can win this thing. And they proved it. They got hot. And the teams that you mentioned, Jay, like they didn't beat SMU and Boise and then Penn State. I mean, they beat Tennessee and Oregon and Notre Dame along the way, Texas as well. I mean, Ohio State beat all the teams that a lot of people were picking to win this thing.
And you talk about the seeding, and you talked about a couple weeks that you didn't like the seeding. So even that 8 seed, right? If you were doing the seedings the way you thought it should be done, I don't even know if they would have been that 8 seed. But it's a beautiful thing, right? Talk about peaking at the right time. Alabama was 13. Had they got in, who knows? Maybe they would have made more noise than SMU. But the number by the name in terms of this college postseason doesn't bother me at all, right? Notre Dame lost early on and then blew everybody out for 11 straight weeks. So go ahead.
No, I was going to say, I don't know if you saw the odds for next year that were already posted. Circa was all over it. And I know that ESPN Bet and other places got those up as well. But for next year's college football playoff odds, Texas, the favorite at plus 450. That's got Arch Manning written all over it. Ohio State plus 500, Georgia plus 600, Oregon plus 750 along with Penn State. Then there's Alabama at plus 1,300. The Domers at plus 15, Tennessee at plus 1,600, and LSU plus 1,800. Then after that, everybody is 20-1 or bigger like Clemson, Ole Miss, Miami, Texas A&M. And you know what's great, though, Jay? And you brought this up when we were talking in the NFL about Washington a little bit earlier. Like you threw down pizza money, I'll say, on the Bears, right? It's you took a stab at $10 at 150 to 1. Hey, throw some money on there. I wonder if in college football, now that we have a playoff, we're going to start to get the same thing of find a couple of teams you throw some pizza money on at the beginning of the year, knowing that if they get hot and make a run, they've at least got a chance to win the thing.
North Carolina, baby. Let's go. That's where I'll be throwing my pizza money.
You are reading my mind. And by the way, South Carolina is at plus 4,000. I did not see North Carolina. I mean, so if we're talking 40, 50, 60, 70 to 1 on Belichick at North Carolina, come on, man.
Dude.
And you know what? If they would put that big a number on them to win it, imagine the number you and I will get when we lock in for UNC to make it.
Dude, no question about it. Now, I believe schedule's not too daunting. Clemson on there, I think, at one point, but I think they could find a way. Over, yeah. We were talking about those season wins, but we're
over 7. Dude, over 7.5 looks real juicy right now, doesn't it? Have you seen what Bill's been bringing into North Carolina?
Oh gosh, but he's got his son Steve there. That's got to at least take one win off the season win total. I'm not a Steve Belichick guy here. Just saying, maybe he's figured out how to coach football. I don't know.
Yeah, I think the evidence of what happened with the New England Patriots defense this year might lend a little credibility that Steve Belichick at least had a clue.
Fair, and I think UW improved fairly significantly under the tutelage of Stevie B.
Oh, yeah. And, you know, what league are they in now? They're just roaming nomadically across the country is Washington. And then UFC 311. Well, first of all, a couple of things. And I do want to get, I don't want to bring it down, but I want to get serious for a moment. I know that you have deep connections to Los Angeles. You flew in there in a time where it was, it's a mess out there. What was it like being in LA with everything going on?
We know it's interesting. LA is a vast place. So frankly, we were saying in downtown LA, the fights are in Inglewood. There wasn't a sniff of the fires. No pun intended, didn't smell it. You didn't really get a feel for that. Now, my wife is from LA. I lived in LA for a few years in Santa Monica, very close. And what I will tell you, my friend Bilal Muhammad, who's a UFC welterweight champion in Chicago, where he's from, they have these stairs that he'll work out on, these stairs where you go up and down. And Santa Monica, California has these stairs that I was telling Bilal are tougher than those stairs in Chicago. And I said to my wife, I'm going to take Bilal to the Santa Monica stairs. And she said to me, I think they're not even there. I think they probably burned down. So I think they were at the bottom of the Palisades, so we couldn't even go there. But I will say it was special to get out there during that time. But I'd be lying to you. It was not a very, my brother wanted to go down. My brother John wanted to go down where the fires were to sort of get a feel for it and then sort of see some of the people. We were quite removed. But what I will say, we stayed at the Intercontinental in downtown LA. I believe it's the tallest building on the West Coast, and the lobby's on the 70th floor. So all these UFC folks that hate California, there's a lot of hate for California in America, right? So they're all on the 70th floor, the view of Los Angeles and the Hollywood sign. One morning I go down, Bilal Muhammad sitting there having a coffee by himself. He had never been to LA before. We went to a Lakers game. I was wearing my Boston Celtics sweatshirt. That didn't go over too well. We were rooting for the Brooklyn Nets, rooting against the purple and gold. But quickly, UFC 311, Umar Nurmagomedov, I know he cost some people some parlays, but was 18-0, the cousin of Khabib, Merab Dvalishvili. I mean, I don't even have enough words. The pace that he sets is just on another level. He's putting himself in the conversation as one of the greatest bantamweights of all time. And then Islam Makhachev taking care of Renato Moicano, late notice replacement for Arman Tsarukyan. 15 straight in the UFC for Islam, 4th straight lightweight title defense. Just elite, maybe the greatest of all time.
Well, and for Moicano, he's walking in the cage against a freaking animal and one of the best to ever do it in Islam. So that's a tough spot for Moicano. I know you know Moicano pretty well. You were jacked up for him to have the opportunity. Look, I think in UFC, people forget you have to bust your ass to even be in the spot to where Moicano found himself in to be worthy to throw into a main event. And because Jay, there's people look at him and he wasn't ready. He wasn't. And I think people underestimate just how tough a spot that is against that particular fighter.
100%.
That's the hook, is that if you were walking in there against anybody but Islam, maybe you had a chance to make it into a third round, but that guy is just on another level. And he looks like he looks through you.
That's a good way to look at it. Renato Moicano had won 4 straight coming in, and he was supposed to face Beneil Dariush. Hanato made some comments yesterday about feeling like he had a real advantage on the feet against Dariush. And even in the first few minutes against Islam, Moicano did some decent things on the feet. I think there was one sort of knockdown that was more of a slip, but Hanato looked pretty good on the feet there. And I think that was part of his approach. But Beneil Dariush, his opponent, right, had won 8 straight, put himself in a position to deserve a title shot a couple years ago, right, but then lost 2 fights in 2023 and then hadn't fought in 2024. So it was very fascinating to me to have a guy in Dariush who is really an elite black belt mixed martial artist that really at times in his career deserved that title shot, where a guy like Moicano, even though he was the guy that deserved it between those two right now, was maybe less deserving overall in the body of work, right? And Beneil Dariush gets sent home, and Hanato, instead of getting to fight Dariush as a favorite and keep the streak going, maybe got a bag for that title shot, but now you got to sort of chase that back again. So I'd love to talk to Hanato and see where he's at mentally, because that winning streak, came to a screeching halt in the first round.
Yeah, and I do think that for a guy like Moicano, running back or resetting to fighting Dariush is probably the way Dana White goes with it,
Absolutely.
right?
I agree.
Moicano stepped up. He helped out the promotion. He did what he could. Okay, now let's put him back in the fight that he was supposed to have. So I sent this to you I think it might have been on Friday when we locked these in. So my youngest is a big UFC fan, and he said to me, we were like, let's put some bets together, and he goes, well, we got to do an Evan Ov parlay. And I go, oh, that's brilliant. So you basically, in a way, it's almost like a Dagestani parlay, kind of. But all of the guys who have OV or EV at the end of their last names, we ended up throwing them all together, right? So I got a 5-legger, and who was it that Guskov ended up pulling the upset? Added tremendous value, right? He was like a plus 400 dog or something like that. And I just needed Umar to come through, and it would have been $60 wagered and about 300 on the return on the Evs and Ovs. So look,
well, Guskov, real quick though, Guskov, I got to meet that guy. What an animal! He was not a dog though. I believe he was a fairly significant favorite over that guy.
Who was the one who was the dog? I thought there was one of the Evs and Ovs who was a dog that added value, but I digress.
Fair. But I want to say about Guskov, right? I met him and actually got to talk to him a little bit. And he said he would have finished the fight. He broke his hand early on, but he said he would have finished the fight. But sometimes tough when you get a guy off the street. So I thought he was pretty poised. But one thing I want to touch on real quick, Jamal Hill. Everybody I talked to absolutely loved Jamal. I considered Jamal a friend. That line against Yuri Prochazka, it opened as a pick'em. By the time that closed, it was close to minus 140 for Jamal Hill. I think at certain point, he didn't look like he had an edge to me. I think there were times where he maybe threw some haymakers where I think he could have been a little more technical, but I was sorry to see Jamal lose, was rooting for my boy. So, yeah, it was funny. At the end of the night, this guy, one of Rogan's security, came up to me and said, you're a little quiet tonight. Hanato and Jamal Hill, a couple of my guys lose, and I think maybe it affected me a little bit.
Yeah, it probably did. By the way, it was Gafarov who was against Nakamura, who was plus 425. That was the one that gave us big value on. We would have returned some decent numbers there. But you're right. Umar breaks his hand. Look, in terms of Jamal Hill, I kind of feel like he just kind of slides back down the ladder a little bit, and now he's in a spot like you mentioned with Dariush you're going to have to work your way back to getting the title shot. And I got to say, I was surprised at how it didn't look like Jamal had anything. And that's what kind of got me, was that it was, boy, he looks ready to fight. He's never going to look like Johnny Hotbody. Like, that's not Jamal Hill, right? But I don't know. It just did. I thought there was a little detachment there, but that's just me. And look, these are world-class fighters. We're talking about Jamal Hill going against a guy who is now right back in line to get a title shot once again. Maybe if you want to make the fight a third time, Dana White, and I don't know if he wants to, with Alex Pereira just running through everybody right now.
Well, Brian Butler, who's Jamal's manager, put out an Instagram post, and I think he wrote, about Jamal, and he's like, you don't know the guy I know, something like that, right? And I agree with him wholeheartedly. I feel like you don't know the guy that we know. Jamal's a real good guy, but I feel as though maybe the guy that we know, in a way, he brought into the octagon, and Jamal can't bring that guy into the octagon. He has to bring the guy we don't know. He has to be that bad man. There's the sportsmanship. I want the Kevin Garnett version of Jamal in octagon who doesn't want to hug his opponent at the end of the second round.
That is a great point. You're right. You have to go in there with the bad intent. That's why the cage is made. And you're not supposed to be able to get out of there. Hey, you heard Jason mention, I know we're at the halfway point of gas already, but you heard Jay mention he does some stuff with the folks at Odd Sharks. You can get Anik versus Anik every Thursday at 11:30. You can get Gresh and Anik you're watching right now. That is gas. You can get that each and every Tuesday at 11 a.m., whether it is on X, whether it is on Instagram. You can get us on YouTube as well. At The Real Gresh is where you can find where we will be, baby, and where we won't be. We will not be in Kansas City or Philadelphia for these conference championship games. But, Jay, I really think that we've got we have an intriguing one in the NFC, and then we kind of have the chalky sort of what we thought we were going to get in the AFC. And let's start there on the AFC side. Boy, for Josh Allen, I mean, I hate to say it for the guy, Jay, but doesn't it feel like he needs to, like, grab his shirt and just go, and there's the S underneath it there, and hope Superman can just lead you to a win?
Oh, I hear you. And I think there were a lot of things about the Chiefs last week where they were sort of ripe to be upset, even though it was weirdly not close, but Houston outgained them. Neither team turned the football over, but I think Buffalo really does need to play a very clean football game if they're going to come out victorious. And I do have a play on this game that I'll give you in a little bit, but I will say a lot of AFC East fans root against your division rivals, I find. And I know you don't like the Bills fans and you root against that team. My brother always tries to take the Bills down with the happiness hedge, and he has a lot of action on the Bills. But I'm rooting very hard for Josh Allen to realize a championship, not only an AFC championship. And in a weird way, I feel like that would be quite an achievement for him, even if he does it with the Super Bowl. But I would love to see Josh Allen get this done, even as a Patriots fan. I root for guys and teams that have never won to realize greatness. The Lions, that was tough, I think, for a lot of casual fans to see the Lions go out like that. So I think there are going to be a lot of people rooting really hard for Buffalo to get it done. Question is, can they get it done, right? Chiefs last year had to go 3 times. They beat the Dolphins at home in that freezing game. Then they go at Buffalo, at Baltimore to put themselves in the Super Bowl. Now this, they set themselves up perfectly. You get that game against Houston. Kansas City is much healthier now than they were in week 11 when they went to Buffalo and lost by 11.
There's no doubt. And the way Kansas City managed the regular season is very different than the way clearly they're managing the postseason. Now, it's Kansas City -1.5 right now. The over-under is at 47.5. Everybody sees this game as being pretty close. And for me, Jay, you use the word greatness, right? And I don't want anyone to usurp our guy, Tom Brady, as the greatest quarterback of all time. However, there is something about Patrick Mahomes that is starting to intrigue me a little bit. The way I used to sit and watch Tom Brady or be a part of these games or something like that, where you just sit there and you're like, man, I'm seeing greatness. I'm seeing something that I might never see again. But I will say this, for as much as I hate Buffalo, Jay, Kansas City is ripe to be picked. If there's ever a year in which Buffalo can get them, this is the year. Look at Kelsey in that divisional round. Where has that guy been?
Right.
But that points to the danger that Kansas City really ends up providing Buffalo. And to your point, can Buffalo deal with all of the weaponry? Because even coming out of this divisional round game, all those guys are still healthy. And Buffalo didn't have to deal with that in the regular season matchup.
Well, and even DeAndre Hopkins, like the least targeted guy. Ultimately, I'll be rooting for Buffalo. I just don't think they get it done. I'm going to give you a selection. I saw the Chiefs money line -126 on FanDuel. I'm not going to mess around with that 1.5, but Kansas City's undefeated at home this season. I just think they stay there, right? So Mahomes 3-0 outright and against the spread in the playoffs head-to-head versus Josh Allen. By the way, all 3 playoff meetings have gone over the total, over 6-2 in their matchups. I don't think there's going to be a ton of weather, so I may look at that over as well. But we talked about last week, Buffalo, Baltimore, right? Buffalo outgained by 143 yards, as we said, 4 turnovers for Baltimore, 0 for Buffalo. The Bills did beat the Chiefs in week 11. We talked about that. 2 interceptions for Mahomes that day. You talked about the health of Kansas City. Tony Farmer, a guy I work with at oddshark.com, right? He's on the Chiefs money line as well. He pointed out 2 members of the secondary for Buffalo, Taylor Rapp and Taron Johnson, both could be out. Rapp day to day, banged up his hip last week after a big interception. The Bills defense, to me, they have their moments, but they're inconsistent. They've given up 40 several times this season, right? They're in the bottom third of the league in pass defense, not a great place to be against Mahomes. So for me, when I look at this game and this Chiefs team, you talk about the Patriots, right? And everyone wants to talk about 3 straight for the Chiefs. How about 4 out of the last 6, right? That's big too. They're going for their 4th here. And that defense, right? Omenahue last week and Karlaftis, man, I just think this Chiefs defense is prime. I'm not sure we get a great game here. I really like the Chiefs here. Yesterday in the huddle, I said I leaned Bills because we weren't making picks. I dove into this last night and this morning. I don't think Buffalo finds a way.
I am 100% with you. I think when you look at some of the touchdown props, I think that, and good job by Cody of pulling that up. You know, Josh Allen, anytime touchdown is even money right now. Please, we should probably jump on that before it ends up swinging the other way. And I do think there is a chance that these running backs end up getting into the end zone. The James Cook anytime touchdown, the Kareem Hunt anytime touchdown. I think those look pretty juicy. But I'm with you, Jay. I think what we're going to get is high scoring, but ultimately Kansas City gets it done. And, you know, this was the game a couple of years ago where everybody, you know, lost their minds because there was the coin flip and overtime and things like that. And it's a reminder that it's just not about offense in the NFL. And Kansas City has proved that this year. You know, they sunk the money into Chris Jones. They let Tyreek Hill walk a couple years ago. They've been winning. Tyreek's down in Miami now talking about, hey, maybe I want to get the hell out of here, or at least intimating a little bit that he might want to get out of here. So yeah. I'm with you. I think for the Bills, this is the shot to get Kansas City, because here's what's coming down the pike for Kansas City, Jay, and you and I lived this. You had the guy, you had the coach, right? And as people start to shuffle through, Travis Kelce's 35 years old. He might marry one of the richest people in the world. What's going to be his motivation maybe after a three-peat to keep playing? He's got a podcast worth $100 million. And again, go make babies with Taylor Swift, for God's sake. You know what I mean? Like, go cash that check on the other end. But in all seriousness, what New England did was reinvent around Tom Brady. Can Kansas City do the same? And Jay, it feels like they're on the verge of having to go through what I would call the first reinvention of the Kansas City Chiefs. Because think of this, Andy Reid's pretty old too. We never had to worry about Belichick walking out the door in the prime. Now with Mahomes, Andy Reid would have to coach until he's 75 to match up with Mahomes by the time he's done with his career. So that's why this is a real teetering point. If Buffalo can get Kansas City now, you've sort of put the stake in their heart as they need and get ready to reinvent themselves over the next decade around Pat Mahomes.
Yeah, and if I'm being honest with you, I couldn't be less worried about Mahomes and the Chiefs being able to reinvent themselves. I think Mahomes is one of one, and we talk about all the elite quarterbacks in the league. I still put him on a pedestal, and I think that even if they get a setback this year, they're going to be live next year as well, the Kansas City Chiefs, because they just find a way, and I think they will as well. But back to those propositions real quick, because I absolutely love Josh Allen anytime touchdown. I saw it plus 115 at BetMGM. It popped off the screen, even money most other places. James Cook not getting as many goal line carries as he had been, right? He lost some to Ty Johnson, Ray Davis, and Josh Allen last week. Allen, 18 total carries in the postseason, 10 last week. But he's so nifty down there. It's not just a tush push. It's like a broken play, or he's sort of offset and he's able to, it might be the play might call it for right up over center and he's going to take it off tackle. He could just find his way to hit pay dirt all day. Chiefs defense has allowed the 8th most rushing touchdowns to opposing quarterbacks. So I absolutely love Josh Allen. And Tony Farmer, I'm going to bring him up again on oddshark.com. He talks a lot about betting propositions on quarterbacks rushing in the postseason, whether it's attempts or yardage, because inevitably these quarterbacks that are protected in the regular season and have great skills with their legs, those tend to be utilized in the postseason. So I absolutely love Allen to hit pay dirt again in Kansas City, even if he doesn't punch his ticket to New Orleans.
And if Kansas City ends up getting like a 10-point lead or something like that, Allen's going to run around, increasing your chances of him getting into the end zone. And then, Jay, there's the NFC Championship game where the Eagles have been installed as a 6-point favorite. This is, the rare time where you get the third matchup of a season. That's what we're getting here. I know that NFL history has shown that, to beat a team 3 times in the season is almost impossible. These teams have split the difference so far at 1-1, but that whole third game, everybody gets themselves into a Fruity Whip headache over. But it's as simple as this, man. I think for Washington, they come in, and I said it last week, they literally come in with nothing to lose. All of the pressure is on Philadelphia, and Philadelphia played well, but I don't know if anybody, went nuts over the way the Eagles played last weekend. But I'll tell you this, if the Commanders can't deal with Saquon Barkley, it doesn't matter what Jaden Daniels have in his ability to come back. Saquon is on some kind of heater right now, and you talk about taking over in that divisional round. No one else took over the way Saquon Barkley did.
No question about it. And, I know we talk about the Patriots a lot, but we had a lot of opportunities to watch the Patriots and have a lot of different postseason circumstances. So you look at a team like Philadelphia, I don't think anyone really loved how they performed against Green Bay. It was kind of a funky game with the Rams in the snow. And I'm not making any excuse, but I do believe that Philly would have been ripe to be upset had the flurries not been fallen, because I think the Rams, they don't have the ability to run like that. They fumbled 3, 4. I think they lost 3 fumbles, some big bad moments for the Rams, and even some inability for sort of Puka Nacua to grab his footing. So I think they were sort of ripe to be upset last week. I'm not sure they are as much this week. If we go back to the Week 16 matchup, Philadelphia at Washington, where Jalen Hurts gets concussed in the first quarter, I think that game just doesn't play out like that. And we've talked about this on the show. I don't think it plays out like that had he not got injured. But what that did for that Commanders team, 5 passing touchdowns that day for Jaden Daniels. I really think it gave Washington a lot of confidence heading in. They've been underdogs in every game so far. Why not us? You can be sure. And that division opponent thing, I think really, I don't love during the regular season, when you get Steelers, Ravens, everyone's like, oh, division opponent, it's going to be close. But here in the postseason, that familiarity, Washington, you can be sure, thinks they can win. However, I think this could be that one game where Philly sort of reminds us what they did during the regular season, where if you can't stop the run, there's really not a lot to discuss.
Yeah, and I think for Washington, like Jay, in the back of my mind, I can't help but think about, okay, this is where everything turns back into a pumpkin, right? This is where Cinderella's glass slipper falls off, whatever. It's normally right around this round. And I would say that had the Rams won and Washington were going to LA, I would feel much better about Washington being able to pull the upset. But to your point, you know Philly so well. They know you. There's a ton of institutional familiarity. And I just think the better team has the advantage here. And that is, to me, clearly Philadelphia, because of what is going on their defensive side. But the one thing, I just hopped on DraftKings so real quick here, Jay. The passing yards, they're now allowing you to pick your yards, right? So if you want Jaden Daniels plus 225, you can get that at minus 115. But if you want to go Jaden Daniels 200 plus, you're at minus 220. So you have the ability to kind of pick your prop. Jaden Daniels over 250 is plus 170. But Daniels for 2 touchdowns or more is plus 120. And don't you think that the only way Washington is going to be able to keep up, and I'm not saying they can't run the ball, but it feels like if Washington is going to hang around in this game, the Jaden Daniels numbers are going to be big. And those are the props that I'm focused on right now.
Well, and even throwing in 150 plus into a parlay, I think there's a lot of value with some of these same game parlays that to your point, if Washington is going to even cover the spread or hang around, that certain things will need to come in. Just a couple numbers on this game, right? And I want to talk about this spread, right? With 6 or 5.5. So the Eagles, 16, 24-1 against the spread when laying at least 4 points under Nick Sirianni, including the playoffs. They're 6-14 against the spread, including the playoffs since the start of last season, right? They've won 9 straight at home, but 5-4 against the spread, 4-1 against the spread in their last 5 at home, and 5-1 against the spread in division games. I'm leaning toward taking the points here today. I don't have a play on the side. Frankly, if I wanted to play the Commanders, it's hard for me to look past the money line because I certainly think in a close game, you can get a backdoor cover either way. So I will be looking at that Commanders money line. But I got another prop on this game that I really am loving more and more as we go along. And it's Jalen Hurts over 29.5 rushing yards. Minus 110 at BetMGM I saw earlier today. So he's eclipsed this total, Gresh, in 5 straight games, over 29.5, and 10 of his last 11. The only game in that 11 that he didn't do it, he had 29 on the nose. All the attention to Saquon Barkley, rightfully so, right? The week 16 game between these two teams when he was concussed, 3 rushes for 41 yards for Jalen. So still got over it that day. What am I missing here with Jalen Hurts? I think there's a great chance that whether it's a scramble here or there, for him to eclipse 29.5 feels like a slam dunk to me. I can also get it, I think, on underdog over 19.5 and connect it to some other things. So I think Jalen finds his way with his legs a little bit. I don't expect snow on the ground in Philadelphia.
Yeah, I don't either. And it's funny, I checked the weather in Kansas City, and it'll be cold, but nothing that neither team can handle, especially from Kansas City and Buffalo. And I think you make a great point about Jalen Hurts, because they're so patient with the run game with Saquon that it has taken away some of those non-short yardage runs from a guy like Jalen Hurts. But to your point, Jay, what was that number again? Like 40 or 29.5? I think it was. 29.5. You know what that is? That's one run on a busted play.
Bingo.
And you're right there, and then you're playing the whole stat game maybe the rest of the way. So that over 29.5, I'm with you. It looks very juicy. And if the game is going to be high scoring and close, then there are going to be athletes out there trying to make plays. Jalen Hurts is definitely one of them. I like the Jaden Daniels 2 passing touchdowns or more prop. Now that's a plus 120 right now. If you jump on that, it feels like, okay, maybe you might be able to get a little better value, but over 29.5 on the Hurts rushing yards, a couple of touchdowns in there from Jaden Daniels, you can end up having yourself a day. And then, not to jump ahead, Jay, so I feel like you and I are both vibing. We're getting Kansas City and Philadelphia in the Super Bowl coming up in a couple of weeks, are we not?
Yeah, I feel as though I'm leaning chalk here. And, I was asked to make my Super Bowl pick on OddsShark before the postseason. And we're always very well prepared, but they sort of sprung it on me. So I didn't prep it, and I went Eagles over Chiefs before the postseason started. But as you know, I don't mind being wrong. And I actually multiple times on that program on this and said, I like the Ravens. I think it's Lamar Jackson's time. But yeah, I do believe chalk will. I'd be rooting so hard for the Commanders, Gresh, but I think Philadelphia will find a way to get in there. And Kansas City as well. And then we'll obviously have a couple weeks to figure out who we think wins the big game. Kansas City and Philly, though, as a Patriots fan, I would really hope we're seeing Buffalo, Washington instead, though.
Oh boy, Buffalo, Washington would be an old time matchup from the early 90s that people would get into. I admit I root for greatness, so I'm not rooting for Pat Mahomes, but I do hope I see it. I'll tell you this though, Jay, we touched on the conference championship or the college football playoff earlier. I had Ohio State winning that. I have, for a real $5 value, right? My kid's a caddy in Florida. He bumped into Justin Thomas. JT was like, yo, my odds on the Masters are not good. You should feel good about me doing well, right? So they're just playing pool one night. So I said, you know what, the hell with it. I'll go Ohio State to win the Natty, the exact matchup of Kansas City, Philadelphia to win the Super Bowl, and then Thomas at plus 3,000. My $5 could win 28.79. So on the first 2 legs, I'm pretty good. But to me, that's like the old codger way of doing it. Give me some football picks that I love, and then let me parlay it with something that I know is going to be a long shot to give me some unbelievable value and more reason to watch the Masters in a couple of months.
No question about it. I will be tailing that. Good luck to JT. And I will say, right, these cross-sport parlays, a lot of these professional gamblers out in Vegas, whether they're betting on these awards, there was one guy that made millions on Marcus Smart, tying him 100-1 to some other things. But yes, right. But I have a 3-team parlay right now. Ohio State to win the national championship. I got that at plus 110. So at some point, Kansas City plus 350 to win the whole thing, and SGA to win the NBA MVP at plus 110. So that total bet is 18-1 right now. So really, it feels like Kansas City is going to be the toughest leg to get home there. But I love looking at those cross-sport things. And I will say, last season, both home teams lost in the conference championship weekend games. And home teams the last 3 postseasons are 2-4 against the spread in those conference championship games. Unders 5-1. So going to be a lot of pressure on that Philadelphia team, to win that football game, Andrew.
Oh, there's no question. And look, you and I, like you just mentioned SGA to win the MVP in the NBA. We haven't even started to look there. And I did see in watching the Celtics game last night, they're now 30-13. So we've crossed the halfway point in the NBA season, and now we're getting into trade time. So there's sort of the bets that you make in the NBA, Jay, of the teams you think are going to do well. And then I'm a believer that after the trade deadline, even if you hold back some of your spend, after the trade deadline, you kind of need to repurpose some of those bets. Because let me just throw this one at you. Where does Jimmy Butler end up? If Jimmy Butler ends up a New York Knick, as a Boston Celtic fan, I'm feeling a little different about the Celtics' path of getting to the NBA Finals. That's the only reason that I bring that up. We're about to get the flurry of trades in the NBA, and there will be at least one team who will emerge, and we'll look at it at the betting market and be like, oh boy, that's juicy. It's now they got something once they went and made a trade. And I do wonder how the trade deadline might affect some of the betting markets here as we head closer towards the All-Star game.
I tell you what, I was thinking a lot about this Jimmy Butler situation, and maybe it wasn't on my radar, but I'll tell you right now, if I were 30, how many NBA teams are there? 32? If I were 29 of those teams, I wouldn't want him. But if I were the New York Knicks, absolutely. Talk about the missing piece. I feel like they need that little edge. And I agree with you. As a Celtics fan, that would really, to me, put the Knicks in a very different conversation. When they acquired Cat in the offseason, I have a friend who's a Knicks fan. He asked me if I was worried. I said, I'll worry about it after the Celtics hoist their banner from last year that they haven't raised yet. And I think the Celtics could suffer a major injury and still win back-to-back championships. But Jimmy Butler, with that existing roster, would be a tremendous fit. But like I said, if there are any other teams, I think he can be very cancerous in that locker room.
Yeah, I think you got to have the right guy to handle him. And that's where, that's where Tibbs could end up making the difference. And there you see right there, the Celtics are still plus 110 to win the East. The fact that the Cavs ran out to such a great record, I think has kept the Celtics from being minus money there. I figured they probably would have been minus 110, not plus 110. But then there are the Knicks that are lurking. And for as much as Cleveland's having a great year, Jay, to me, they're the team that has the great year and then loses in the conference finals because they're still one player away or they're just not ready yet. With the Knicks, they've been tweaking to match the Celtics. And that's what scares me a hell of a lot more about the Knicks than the Cavs.
Yeah, and I agree with that. And I don't think home court matters maybe as much as it did back in the 80s and 90s. But I will say that Cleveland Cavaliers team, I think, would have been a lot more difficult to eliminate last season had Donovan Mitchell not gotten injured. So they were giving the Celtics really a lot that they couldn't handle. So I don't know. I think Cleveland and New York, I think the Celtics, it's going to be very difficult for them to get through and win a back-to-back title. But I think that they're about as interested in the regular season as I am at this point. So,
and look, we'll get more into the NBA as we go along. And there you see for the NBA Finals winner right there, you got the Celtics and the Thunder are pretty much even. One's 250, one is plus 260, and then after that, it's kind of everybody else filling in. I think the Cavs are up there right now because of the record. The Knicks are a real threat. I'll tell you what, if you're a value bettor and you're looking at a team who has been there and done it and could do it again, and you're looking for a price, Jay, that the Denver Nuggets plus 1,400 is jumping right out at me in a big, big way.
I hear you. And my brother has some Lakers Western Conference action out there. I do think the West potentially, OKC is all the rage, until a healthy Anthony Davis and LeBron James show up, and maybe they could make some magic happen. But yeah, I don't know. I want to shift back to football here because I want to talk about, as we look at the Super Bowl and we look at sort of the odds for the Super Bowl right now, the Eagles have now become the favorite, about plus 180, Chiefs plus 220, Bills plus 250, somewhere in there. And then you see the Commanders 7-1, 7.5-1. So last night prior to the game, I played Ohio State money line tied to the Commanders to win the Super Bowl. So I think I got plus 913 or close to 10-1. But I do believe Washington absolutely could go win this football game in Philadelphia. And if they find, I do believe this is kind of wide open. I really do. Bills, Chiefs, you could say somewhat of a coin flip. So yeah, and that's moved down to plus 650 here on DraftKings. So I guess I do see some value in the Commanders because I do look at this Final Four as being somewhat wide open, even though we both like chalk.
Yeah, I am not as bullish on that as you because of the Cinderella factor for Washington. Yes, they have the chance to go in there and win. There's no question. Like, I'm not denigrating them. However, to me, if I were going to put money on one thing, it would be related to Kansas City and Philadelphia. And look, I only on the parlay that I rolled out to you, Jay, that was just exact matchup to get to the Super Bowl.
Right.
That wasn't even a pick. I think Philadelphia is still very live to win this thing. Philly has overcome themselves. And to me, that says something about really good football teams when they've overcome their own infighting, their own bickering. The head coach at times comes across as an idiot, yet people and that team still playing hard for all those coaches. So if I were to stack them, for me, it would be Kansas City, Philadelphia, Buffalo, and then Washington. But I can understand doing the sprinkle with Washington at this point, if not even just to get there to maybe win the thing, because the value that it adds in whatever parlays you want to throw together. I mean, look at even the Commanders right there for name the finalists. Commanders and Bills are plus 500. That number isn't ridiculous, but it is indicative of kind of, I think, where the betting market lies, not even just where the handicappers lie.
Couldn't say it better myself. And I will say, right, when I look at sort of these games this weekend, as we sit here on a Tuesday, there are going to be some things we learn, right? We're going to learn some things about some injuries and where Buffalo stands. But also, too, for these games, I feel very similar. The Ravens, Bills, and the Chiefs, Bills, to me, from a gambling standpoint, right? John and I pick 5 games against the spread in the NFL every week. You can be sure there are weeks where we don't play 5 straight wagers on our wagers from Anik versus Anik. So what I will say is Bills, Chiefs, if anyone's going to the window with a real heavy wager on one side of that game, look yourself in the mirror, because if you don't think that game is a coin flip, just like Ravens Bills last week, I think you got another thing coming. And you could say the Ravens outplayed them too, right? So things don't always go your way. Look at, and the guys in Vegas, they know what they're doing, right? Look at the national championship game last night, sitting on 8 until the final seconds.
It's really amazing, right? That 8.5, that was some pretty awesome stuff right there. So we know we're going to get Championship Sunday. Oh, can I hit you with something real quick? Because
Please.
I did like some serious radio this weekend and stuff like that. There are a lot of people who say the divisional round of the playoffs is the best weekend in football. Do you subscribe to that?
Everybody seems to say that, and I don't subscribe to it. I think it's wild card weekend. I like the games totally stacked up. I don't. And look, yes, are you going to get some blowouts? Sure. I couldn't agree with you. Yeah, it sounds like you agree with me. No.
Oh, 100%.
And you know, it dovetails with your point off the top. We only got 3 games left the rest of the year.
That's pretty scary. And then the draft, which we know will be very interesting for multiple reasons. Just quickly, because it is a way to kind of end today's edition of Gas, and also with some NFL discussion as well. And there you see the odds on the number 1 pick. And how interesting is it that it's Cam Ward still right now at minus 220, with Shadir Sanders at plus 140, and then Travis Hunter in there at plus 1,400. I'm very curious to see how the Ward and Sanders market kind of shake out. But speaking of Sanders, if I even go into my Peter Griffin voice, is Mr. Sanders here? He did. So will Dion leave Colorado to go be the coach of the Cowboys?
I don't think so. And I think I did think so maybe a year ago, but I'm not sure. I'm not so sure that Shador is part of that conversation, right? That Dak contract that was just signed is not really an easy out, but maybe Shador needs some development. So we'll see what happens there. But I want to ask you the same question I asked you a week ago, but in a different context. I asked you if you thought there was any chance Travis Hunter slips to number 4. And Andrew Avery, the host of the Huddle, says to me yesterday, he was looking at a mock draft where Travis Hunter slipped to 4. I guess some defensive end was shooting up some boards, and they found the defensive end at number 2, Sanders going to the Giants at 3. But I want to, so I guess my question to you is, do you think maybe there is a chance? And then, but I also want to make a comment before you answer the question that I really still don't care. I don't care as much. I'm not as bullish. I don't care who they get at number 4. I think they're going to get a great player either way. But do you think Travis Hunter could find his way to New England?
He could, but I think it's in a little different scenario. Now, the player that you're talking about is Penn State defensive end Abdul Carter, who I know that the Tennessee Titans, before they made a move on Rand Carthon, I worked with a guy who covers that team, and he was like, no, they like Abdul Carter. Now, Rand Carthon got ran out of the building, so I don't know if Tennessee is still, or will they flip and smart on a quarterback? Or here's the other thing, keep an eye on Ole Miss quarterback Jackson Dart, because that's a dude who's going to be moving up boards, and we know the Giants at number 3, they want a quarterback, they want a guy. But here's something to remember as well. Last year, the New England Patriots did not make a choice of quarterback. All they did was take the guy who fell to them. So will the Patriots engage in moving up or moving back if they do love or don't love somebody? Are they going to fiddle around on the board, or do they sit there at number 4 and then wait for either a tough set of decisions that need to be made by people who are hopefully prepared this time, or people start calling to get in on that number 4 pick? Jay, it sounds crazy. People are focusing on Abdul Carter. I'm going to put my chips to the center of the table that there's a quarterback that's going to rise up and get in there. And then for New England, it would be, do we want Campbell, the big tackle? Do we want Carter, the defensive end? Do we want Travis Hunter? Or do a bunch of people call and give us an offer we can't refuse? And unfortunately, that's the scary part of where the Patriots are at.
Well, and I think they're in a great spot. I'm going to trust your instincts because I think you still want Travis Hunter. You've been bullish on wanting him the whole time. So I'm going to sort of toe that line with you and trust you there, even though my instinct as time goes on is to want that big guy on either line. But I think Travis Hunter is the guy. And I actually sit here today thinking they got a decent chance to get him. And just to your other point, right? Yes, you are very, very true. The Patriots didn't draft that guy, Drake May. They were going to take whoever was there. But I still believe all 3 of those guys are going to have good long careers in this league.
Let me leave you with this, as the great Dusty Rhodes once said. A friend of mine had a conversation with Mike Vrabel the other day, and they came away from the conversation of 2 things about Vrabel and what was being asked. Hey, what's wrong in the building? And we're going to get the line fixed. That was the quote from Vrabel. Now, how they go about doing that will be very interesting to see, because there are some players left over to evaluate. It's not like the O-line. The O-line was bad. There's no question. But if you think about David Andrews coming back, you've still got Onwenu. You have a guard that you've developed. You might only need to draft 1 guy and sneak back up into the bottom of the first round to get so, and get Travis Hunter at the same time, in which, friend, I would be streaking through the quad naked if the Patriots found a way to pull that one off. Anik versus Anik on Thursday, correct?
Yes, sir. 11 a.m. live, oddshark.com.
And make sure you are following us here. Subscribe to the YouTube at The Real Gresh. You see us all over the place at Gas Show AM. He's Anik. I'm Gresh. For our guy Cody Merrow as well. We'll see you next week.